Welcome to the Rotowire DFS podcast brought to you by FanDuel.com, the leader in one-day fantasy sports. I'm your host, Josh Hayes, joined as always by Benny Ricciardi as we break down the Friday NBA DFS slate. You can always find Benny on Twitter at BennyR11 and over at RotoCurve, Rotowire, and as featured right on the DraftKings playbook. And you can also follow me on Twitter at JoshHayesFS. The RotoWire DFS podcast is available on iTunes and Stitcher, live streaming right now, this second here on Google Hangouts, and available on the official YouTube channel at Rotowire. Thanks for subscribing and checking that out. We definitely appreciate that. If you haven't, but you are watching as we speak here on YouTube, please press that red little subscribe button. We definitely appreciate that. We've been lucky enough to add subscribers with each and every show. I have been checking in with that, and been very helpful and awesome. So we definitely appreciate that. Benicio, welcome to another 8 games in the NBA for Friday.
Yeah, pretty decent sized slate. Right in the wheelhouse, 6 to 10 that I like. So definitely looking forward to this one.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do what we do and talk about what you want to do for Friday at the point guard position.
I think I'm going to wind up spending up on at least one point guard here on Friday because there are a couple guys at the top end that I like. You got Chris Paul, who's been playing, basically lights out lately. He's been really, really good, picking up the slack without Blake Griffin and, with them needing him to score and rack up the assist, playing big minutes, putting up big numbers, and he gets a matchup with Sacramento. So you got to expect a ton of points, probably like a 218 to 220 total when this one finally comes out, maybe even more. So you got to think that he's going to be somebody that can put up some big numbers. You also have John Wall going up against Philly. Again, we know that Philly's pretty bad. I like Chris Paul a little more, mostly because of, basically what we saw happen last night. I mean, Philly is susceptible to getting blown out. And when they do get blown out, some guys tend to get less minutes. And if you're paying up for somebody, you really can't afford to have them get less minutes. So I think Paul is probably my number one over John Wall. I also like Kyle Lowry, though. I think that game's going to stay close between Toronto and Cleveland. We know Kyrie Irving is not a very good defensive player. Kyle Lowry's been putting up some pretty big numbers. He's been, him and DeMar DeRozan have basically been carrying the offense for that Toronto team. So I think that he's a decent option as well to save a couple bucks. But my top option up top is probably still Chris Paul. And then coming down from there, the only guy that I'm really looking at in the cheap range, our boy Jordan Clarkson lately. I don't know if you've been watching, but 4 of the last 5 or 5 of the last 6 games, he's been putting up like 6x value for you. Again, he had another big game yesterday. The guy can play. The biggest problem has always been him getting the minutes and getting the usage, because with Kobe out there, he hasn't always seen the shots. But if I needed to save, some money at the point guard spot, I'm not going down to guys like Aaron Brooks, who's just, even if Derrick Rose is hurt, doesn't make value. For me, Clarkson's probably about the lowest that I'd go down there. And I just like the upside that he gives me more than, like the Darren Williams and the Mike Conleys and the Ish Smith is who I have to pay a little bit more for. So for me, you go up top to Chris Paul and then come down to Jordan Clarkson. And, I think you got a really solid duo with those 2 LA guys.
Yeah, I loved what Jordan Clarkson's been doing on the offensive end. We've always said this for some time, that Jordan Clarkson's the most talented player on the LA Lakers. We just need Kobe Bryant to just go somewhere besides, into the lineup and taking away 20 shots from the rest of the team. And, those shots are in part coming from Jordan Clarkson, but he's sort of stepped up his production. I think he's finally gotten himself into a pretty good spot here overall. What I am going to look to do here is do what I've been doing, and talking about, how we need 2 point guards on FanDuel. All right. And, you definitely can make some hay with, Chris Paul, like you mentioned there. Kyle Lowry is in a good spot. But what I want to do here is take a look at Darren Collison once again. So you decided that you want to go with Chris Paul, or maybe you're going with Wall, whatever you want to do up top. And I'm pairing him with Darren Collison as my number 2 guy. Now take a look at this price tag payoff here over the past, let's say since February 3rd. February 3rd, we got 5.4x, 6.9, 5.7. Little hiccup against Cleveland, 3.5. Then back on track, 6.6, 5. 4.2, it's a little bit surprising, but still got the minutes played, 32 minutes. And then San Antonio Spurs, you were a little bit concerned about him making value there. Still plays 31 minutes and produces 5.5x. So super, super consistent for cash games. And like you just lock and load him as your number 2 point guard. Like we said, getting a ton of minutes at the 2 to finish games. In place of Ben McLemore. So he is an absolute cash game beast right now. And in that same vein, if for some reason you really want to feel better about the matchup that you're attacking, you want to attack Denver, I'm okay with Darren Williams as well that you mentioned him. He is more $1,000 more than Darren Carlson. So you have that going against you. But Emmanuel Mudiay defense is something you always welcome for sure. And he's probable for this game right now. So I think you probably have a good chance to beat the 25 to 30 fantasy points that he's been sitting around in that range. And if he gets up above 35 plus, and he's actually hit 40 in 2 of the past 5, so there's a little bit of that upside there because 40 fantasy points is good for almost 7x or like 6.8x at a 6K price tag. So maybe a little bit more upside for sure than Darren Williams provides. So I'm keeping him in the radar, and I'm drawing the line just below Jordan Clarkson at Darren Williams. Are you okay with that, knowing what I just explained?
Yeah, I mean, Darren Williams has been pretty solid lately, so he's another guy that I'm looking at. Like I said, I like the upside a little more for Clarkson, but I actually used Darren Williams and Clarkson on a lineup last night that wound up cashing for me. So they're both on my good side right now. No complaints for either one.
All right, fair enough. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and flip the page to the shooting guard position here for Friday and talk about what you're going to be doing up top, because it's actually, for the amount of games that are here, I'm not overly impressed with what's available.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I don't really love the top end all that much. The one guy who kind of stands out to me a little bit is Victor Oladipo. He's been playing much better since the Tobias Harris trade, seeing a lot more minutes, more consistent minutes. He doesn't really do a ton in any one category, but he gives you a solid performance almost in every category. He'll score 12 to 18 points. He'll get you 5 to 7 rebounds. He'll get you 4 to 6 assists. He gets a couple steals and blocks. He is a very good defensive player. So he's probably the guy that I'd be looking at if I was going to spend up. But I think there are a bunch of options in like that 45 to 5,500 range that I really like. His teammate Evan Fournier has been playing 30 plus minutes since that trade as well, putting up some pretty good scores. He's right around like 5K, has been giving you close to 30 fantasy points a game. So I'm definitely going to have some shares of Fournier. You got JJ Redick, who's actually below 5K. He's pretty solid for 25 to 30 fantasy points. He had 30 his last game, 25 the game before. He's very scoring dependent, but the guy can score and they need him to score. And he's playing Sacramento where, we've known 2 guards have basically had a field day against Sacramento all season long. So I think Redick can be one of those guys that gets you, a solid 5X floor with, 7 or 8X upside. I mean, he could have a 23, 24-point game here, hit a bunch of threes, grab a couple rebounds and assists, and, give you a 30-plus point fantasy performance for more than 6X. And then depending on the Derrick Rose situation, with Derrick Rose out last game, people were talking about Aaron Brooks. Like, Aaron Brooks is not the guy who gets a bump, in my opinion. I think the guy who gets the biggest bump if Derrick Rose is out again is going to be Etuan Moore, who already has a bump without Jimmy Butler, but yesterday he played the point guard spot as well. So he's like 4,500, I think he was last game, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, his last game he was 4,500 over on FanDuel. Now, he only gets you like 25 to 30 fantasy points. So I'm not expecting him to come and go monster 35, 40 fantasy points, 9X, 10X upside. But if he's 4,500, I think he can get me 25 to 30 and give me a 6X upside, which I'd be perfectly happy with, if I'm looking for a salary saver at the shooting guard position.
Okay, that for me makes total sense. I can get on board with that. For me, I think that this is a spot where I'm going to do what we talked about, which was sort of concerning for us last time, and to say, hey, all right, Jamal Crawford had that one little hiccup. the same sort of situation that you talked about with JJ Redick and having the potential offensive upside from and just use Sacramento as the official cheat code. Okay, and get back in there and say, hey, this is the one team that definitely cannot defend the two, and I successfully used Danny Green because of that. And that was my first time playing Danny Green all season. But I knew he was playing Sacramento. I knew Sacramento was going to leave him wide open, and that was good for 30 plus fantasy points in that spot. So in that same situation there, Jamal Crawford back in the mix there. I will go back to the well because we know it is Sacramento and they have a very tough time defending that position. So I'm good there. I think I can sort of say, hey, that's my spot, and it's going to be a cheap option, but I feel pretty good about it. And then Evan Fournier, I know you and I have talked about this earlier on in the week. Another 21 fantasy points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, playing out of position for the most part as the 3, which is good because some people may be concerned that Victor Oladipo is the player that sort of is actually the 2, and so why would you play them together? Well, because they're playing different positions and they're playing on the court at the same time. So you can take Victor Oladipo, who's in a good spot at 6,800 and has been meeting fantasy values, paid off a range of 5.2 to 7.1x, or you can take Evan Fournier for a little bit cheaper there as well. Popped up with 33 fantasy points and similar line to Oladipo against Philadelphia, and it's 5,400 as of yesterday's pricing, or the 23rd pricing on FanDuel. So that's where I'm going to sort of draw my line in the sand with those options. Anybody else you want to stump for before we move forward?
Nope, not really. That's like I said, I think shooting guard's a position where you're going to want to save some money, or you're kind of almost forced to save some money. I mean, the only guy you can really pay up for is DeRozan against Cleveland, which isn't really like a great match. It's not a horrible matchup, but it's not really a great matchup either. And I just don't see myself going up to him because we have some viable options in that, that 7K and below range, guys that we mentioned, Oladipo, Fournier, guys like that, I think are Etuan Moore, like these guys are very easy to throw in there and, allow you to save money to spend up. Like I'd rather take 2 point guards than, 2 of the top point guards and save at shooting guard than go up and get a DeRozan here. So for me, it's going to be a position I save at on Friday.
Yeah, I think I'm with you 100%. The value options are putting right in that 30-point range. So why, spend an extra $50,000 plus to get 30 fancy points, from the same floor or in a similar matchup. But we're going to move on to the small forward position. But before we do that, I want to let all the beloved pod listeners know, hey, are you subscribing to Rotowire.com yet? If you're not, make sure you join in now. It's a free 10-day trial, rotowire.com/pod. Take advantage of it. We got 8 different lineup optimizers for all the major sports: MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL, college football, soccer, golf, customizable league projections. You want to use some of the numbers and all the information, the lineup optimizers that we use for this very show. You can take advantage of it right now. Free 10-day trial, rotowire.com/pod. Let them know Josh and Benny sent you. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what you're doing out there on the wing and your top plays at the small forward position here for Friday.
Yeah, well, I was doing my research this morning. Here's basically the way that I broke it down. I'm going to kind of give you guys a little bit of my thought process of what I was looking at. Up at the top end, you got 3 guys who are likely to outscore everybody else at the position today. So those 3 are going to be LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, and Paul George. Those are the 3 that are a inch or a notch above everybody else at the small forward position. So you look at LeBron going up against Toronto. Toronto's a really good defensive team. They tend to play a little bit of a slower pace, so it's probably not the best spot to look for huge upside out of him. Could he still get you value in, if you're using him in cash? Yeah, I think he probably can, but I don't expect or think that he has an upside game in him against this Toronto team. So then you basically look at Paul George and Carmelo Anthony, who are going up against each other. And Paul George, you have the 2 of these guys just played a couple days ago, which is what I was looking at. And somebody actually sent me the question, one of our listeners actually sent me the question on, Twitter, hey, would you rather play Carmelo or Paul George last night? And the way I broke it down for him is the 2 of them are, they play the same position. They're probably going to match up with each other a little bit. And they're about the same price. So if you're asking which of the 2 I would play, Paul George is known as a pretty good defensive player, so the matchup is not great for Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony is not known as a very good defensive player, so it's at least a neutral, if not a plus kind of matchup for Paul George. So when you're looking at which guys you want to pay up for here on Friday, of those three between George, Anthony, and James, I think taking the discount from James and going down to Paul George is probably the way to do it, because I have George ahead of Anthony. George had like 42 the other night in their matchup. Anthony had 27 fantasy points. So, it kind of worked out along the lines that I thought it would, with, George being the better defensive player and it being a tougher matchup, for him on the offensive end than it was for Paul George. So if I'm paying up here, I think Paul George is the guy, that I want. And then now when you move down, you get into like that mid-range and you have the same question that you're asking yourself at guys like Chandler Parsons and Matt Barnes and Otto Porter, Covington, even Wes Johnson, who's another guy that I like as well. My problem with Wes Johnson, he's playing Sacramento. He's 4,500 and he's been returning, around 5-6x value for you over the last couple of games. My problem is you can also get Matt Barnes against the Lakers for 4,700. So I like both of those guys, but when I'm comparing the two, I think Matt Barnes, with all the, banged up guys like Tony Allen and the fact that they just shipped Jeff Green out and, they're a little bit undermanned right now for both forwards and the wing players. I think that Matt Barnes is probably the guy that I'd rather go down to the bottom and take over a guy like Wes Johnson at, Barnes is 47, Johnson's 45 over on FanDuel. So for me, it's Paul George up top and then Matt Barnes at the bottom. And that's probably the combo that I'm going to be rolling out in both cash and GPPs.
All right. I'm fine with that personally. I think there's a couple other different things that we can take a look at, and that's what I want to get exposure to. I haven't really played LeBron too much because I've always anchored stuff at point guard, sometimes shooting guard with James Harden, and oftentimes at the center position with DeMarcus Cousins. And neither of those were real options today. But LeBron James against the empty set that is the Toronto Raptors and their small forward position, I just think is in an amazing spot for today. So and you take a look at the price tag path too. It's really just a cash play because LeBron has been hovering around 10K, dropped down to 9,900, and has been in the 40 to 50 point range, which is, he hasn't exploded for like a triple double, even though he did have a triple double against Sacramento for 50 fancy points on February 8th. But this is as good as a spot it's going to get. So if you felt like you saved enough at the point guard position, you followed our footsteps here and went cheap at shooting guard, you can actually use LeBron James and balance him with somebody that is one of my favorite players right now, which is Dougie McBuckets. McDermott has been making it rain right now with about 21 to 30 minutes of action. Take a look at the price tag payoffs for the past, let's see here. 6 games. All right, so going back to February 8th, we've got 5x, 6x. Then the ugly game against Cleveland, throw that out. All right, just 7 fantasy points. Then he pops up with probably his best game of the season, 36 fantasy points on FanDuel, good for 10x. We're talking about a $3,600 price tag at the time. It's bumped up only $200 since then, and he produces 4.2 and 5.7x. So if you feel like it's a little bit shaky and deserving of GPP consideration rather than cash, fine for me. I think against Atlanta, and if they do what I think they're going to do, which is match him up against Kyle Korver, because those two of the guys are going to have the similar skill sets, then you're in a great spot overall with that. So I love Doug McDermott, at least for tournaments. I think you can even make a case for cash if you have enough trust. And I think that the way he's been playing over the past 3 games, I think that's fine. I think the floor is safe enough that you don't get absolutely burned if you roll him in cash, but definitely deserves GPP consideration in my mind. And then the last guy I wanted to talk about here too is Chandler Parsons getting matched up against Danilo Gallinari there. We've seen that Chandler Parsons has been a little bit uneven in terms of production. They didn't need him to play big minutes against Philadelphia. That was a blowout. OKC was a bad matchup. But then before that, he popped up for 40 fantasy points in 2 of the past 3 against Memphis and Orlando, both of those on the road. So I think that if you, at least for GPPs, if you want to get back into the exposure area for something that might be a little bit off the board because he's not super cheap and he's not up top in terms of price, I'm fine with Parsons against Gallo for Friday action, at least in some tournaments. Anybody else that you love at the 3 before we move on to the 4?
No, that's it. Like I said, it's for me, it's going to be pretty easy. I like Paul George a lot. And then I'm probably going to go down to one of the two salary savers. And for me, it's Barnes ahead of Wes Johnson. Although Johnson's matchup, I mean, they both have a good matchup. It's the Lakers and Sacramento. So it's like,
Christmas.
I mean, yeah. It's Christmas and your birthday. Neither one of them is going to be a bad day for you,
Yeah, exactly. You have Christmas at home, then you go have Christmas again with your grandparents,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, power forward position is up here. Let's go ahead and talk about what you're going to do at the 4 for Friday.
Yeah, the guy who stands out to me as the one that I'm going to have on like most, if not all of my rosters is going to be Aaron Gordon. 6 games in a row with 30 or more fantasy points, 5x or better value. His price is still only around that 6K range. So unless he gets a huge price jump here, I think he is the one guy that I'm just going to go ahead and, kind of lock into a lot of my rosters. The Knicks, again, power forward defense for the Knicks, not anything that really scares me. Gordon's been seeing a bunch of minutes. He's been producing, rebounding, points, block shots, steals. He's doing a little bit of everything. I really like his game now that they're giving him time. So he's the guy that I'm locking in. And then from there, I'm trying to figure out who that second guy is going to be. But I'm looking more towards the top end here because I don't really love some of the cheap options here. Guys like Marvin Williams, Taj Gibson, Portis, they're all interesting, maybe even like Tristan Thompson or JaMychal Green. But I can make a case for why I don't want to play all of them. So I'm probably going to go up top. I like Millsap's matchup against Chicago. I don't love him as a huge upside kind of guy, but he has been, fairly consistent most of the season, except for that little stretch when, he had somebody in his family die and he hadn't played well in a couple games. But he seems to be rounding it back into form, and he does have that upside. So I like Millsap. Zach Randolph getting extra minutes now, going up against the Lakers. Great matchup. Obviously his production, his usage, his minutes are up without Gasol. So he's somebody that's interests me. Dirk Nowitzki played really well last night, and whenever Dirk gets the minutes and they need him to, I mean, he started out in the first quarter with a -1, and he still managed to finish with 38 fantasy points for the game. So we know Dirk can still fill it up. We know his price is still pretty cheap. I think he has upside there, so he's a very interesting option to me. And then Julius Randle and Miles Turner are the other two guys I'm looking at. Both of the young guys have played pretty well since they've been seeing some extra minutes. The Julius Randle thing, I'm a little bit concerned with, and I actually wanted to ask you about this. Larry Nance Jr. is ready to come back and play. Mm-hmm. Do you think that Byron Scott's going to go back to this? Well, each one of them is going to play 24 minutes when it's clear to everybody who watches it that Randall is the better player and is the guy with the upside and the future that they should be rolling out there more. Do you think he's going to drop from the 32 minutes we've seen back down into that 24, 26 minute range? Because if that's the case,
yeah,
I mean, I hope not, but
at least not the first game back. I can't think, going for the full split the first game back. So that's my thing. I think we're safe at least in the outset. From them. So, going forward, though, I will be a little bit more cautious and monitoring because there was just way too much love for an inferior player from Byron Scott. And like I said, maybe we just don't give Byron Scott enough credit for being a ninja like we think. We think he's this guy's an idiot. He keeps playing Larry Nance Jr., but maybe he already knows that the directive is to go for ping pong balls and put out a worse lineup, which is why they had Lou Williams in over and not developing D'Angelo Russell, who has all the upside, versus Lou Williams, who just really has never actually been a starting point guard at any stretch of time in his entire career. So I expect him to sort of do that now is ridiculous, and didn't work out. And so
didn't they? Wasn't that Laker pick part of the Steve Nash deal? Isn't that the whole thing behind it? They got a protected lottery pick, so they're trying to tank to keep it or something like that. Didn't I hear that?
It's either top 3 or top 5 protected, one of the two. So they've got to be pretty bad. They got to keep the ping pong balls bouncing in order for them to hang on to that pick this year. So that's
now. Let me ask a question, because I've never really understood this, and I think that these protected picks is the dumbest thing ever. So if they if they are bad enough that they wind up with whatever it is, a top 3 or top 5 pick. Does that mean that Phoenix gets compensated with their pick next year or something, or they just not get the pick at all?
Pick rolls to next year, and then it has a I think it goes down to Depending on what the trade was, I'll look it up if you really want to know. But I think it goes into like top 10 protected for 2017, or then it's just like unprotected in 2018. Like you eventually get the pick at some point, or there's like some stipulation that says, okay, you just get the pick, in some cases.
Yeah.
Whatever the pick is, if we're good or bad, you get the 2018 first round pick. So I know there's some stipulations like that. I don't know exactly what they are. So, but yeah.
No, like I said, I was just asking. I always wondered about that because I was like, to me, that's one of the dumbest things ever. It's like, isn't that the whole point of trading a pick? Is like, you don't know if you think you're going to be good, then, you don't like that. To me, it's like, well, there's no upside then in making a trade,
Right. Yeah. The NFL does it right. And it's just like when, you see people get shipped, they're like, give us our first rounder. Or like, all right. And then you're just, hoping that team stinks next year, and so
that their quarterback breaks his leg in week 2 and they finish 2-18 and
absolutely. That's exactly what I'm talking about. All right. Well, what else? The other thing that we need to talk about here is anybody out there who runs their own business. There's a good chance they need a website. If they do need a website, why not do it yourself here with Wix.com? No matter what business you're in, Wix.com has something for you. Used by more than 75 million people worldwide, Wix.com makes it easy to get your website live today. You need to get the word out about your business. It all starts with a stunning website. So with hundreds of designer-made, customizable templates to choose from, the drag and drop editor, there's no coding needed. You don't need to be a programmer or designer to create something beautiful. You can do it yourself with Wix.com. Wix.com empowers business owners to create their own professional websites each and every day. So when you're running your own business, you're bound to be too busy to worry about the schedule, the appointments, the budgets. So when you're too busy to build a website for your business, then that's when Wix.com comes in. With Wix.com, it's easy and free. Go to Wix.com to build your own website today. The results will be stunning. All right, let's go ahead and crack open the center position and talk about whether or not you're using DeMarcus Cousins. I say yay. And you actually can make a case for the other side of it with DeAndre Jordan as well. What's your plan here for the pivot?
Yeah, I actually like both of the centers in this game. I was looking at DeAndre Jordan's matchups, like how he's done in the past against Sacramento. He actually missed the last game that these two teams played this year. But in the first game of the year, he had like 54 fantasy points, like 6 point something X. So I think he's a viable option too if you want to save. But I mean, DeMarcus Cousins has been so good lately. And, you guys have listened to the show. There's value at every position basically today. There's not a lot of superstar studs that you really have to go up and pay up for, especially with the way that the pricing is over on FanDuel. I think you can easily fit DeMarcus Cousins in today without punting. And, he's basically, to me, he's probably 20% better than every other center in terms of floor and ceiling. So if you can fit him in, I think you should always do it. The Clippers-Sacramento game, again, it's going to be like a 220 total, if not more. So I definitely think that Cousins is somebody you can play today. Like I said, I also like Jordan. Vucevic has been putting up some really big numbers over his last 5 or 6 games, giving you I think in his last 6 games, he's averaged 38 minutes, 45 fantasy points or something like that. So he's definitely a viable option that you got to look at. I don't like Pau Gasol against Atlanta. If you look at his game logs against Atlanta, he's underperformed against them in like his last 2 or 3. So, he's not somebody that's on my radar. Don't really love Horford on the other side. Gortat against Philly is interesting. We've been playing centers against Philly with pretty good success all season long. Andre Drummond was on his way to a huge game yesterday, but didn't play much in the fourth quarter because they were up by 30, which is about the only concern you have to have when playing guys against Philly. But I do like Gortat a lot in that matchup. And then you can go down to some of the cheaper options too. I probably would only use them if I was playing on a site where I needed more than one center. But like guys like Robin Lopez have been playing well. Jan Mahinmi have been playing well, giving you a good return. Nikola Jokic has been putting up some big games here and there. So these are guys that I would look at if I'm playing on a site with more than one center. But on the site where we only use one center, I'm paying up for the top. And, most of the time it's probably going to be DeMarcus Cousins. If I have to come down, I think Marcin Gortat is the guy that's a little bit cheaper that I would be targeting.
Yeah, Gortat has been a nice little cheapy play. that we can definitely make a case for here. I want to just give a little bit of a preview about what's happening here, because I think that you're going to see a shift somewhere, and then there's going to be some opportunity to make some hay. Okay. So first of all, DeMarcus Cousins is lock and load, cash, GPP, whatever you want. I think that you can make a strong case and you'll be in a good spot. So no issues with any of that there. For upside and for value, just out of nowhere as of late, Al Horford is playing monster minutes and been balling. So I mean, like, season high 66 fantasy points against the Golden State Warriors was crazy good. And before that, he came up with almost 40 fantasy points within 44 minutes. Missed one rebound for a double-double and just did every single thing. He had a 3, he had 2 assists, he had a steal, he had 3 blocks, and stuffed the stat sheet against Milwaukee. And so, for 7,200 coming down in price, I think you're definitely fine against Chicago and Paul Gasol defense. So there's that. The one thing I want to mention that you can sort of take a look at and watch out for here is now we have Al Jefferson finally back in the rotation, finally getting minutes. And the minutes have not crept up just yet, but he's sitting there in the 21 to 23 range. Once he gets his legs under him, and then once he gets into like the 30-minute range, he gets those extra 6 minutes or begins to start. I mean, he missed 23 games, so this is definitely a huge issue, and it may take a little bit of a while for him to get ramped up to protect him because the knee injury was fairly serious, but at the $5,600 price tag, this is a guy who absolutely should be priced in the same range as Al Horford once he's locked and loaded and ready and going. And we're talking about a good $1,500 something discount. So there'll be a small window for a few days once he finally gets bumped up to take advantage. And so that's what you put him on your watch list. Make a note, make a little post-it, slap it on your side of your computer or whatever, and check those Charlotte box scores right now. So I'm not rolling him out there, tonight against Indiana. But unless you get some sort of news that say minutes restricted lifted or something else like that, it's probably not going to be somebody we can play right now. But you should definitely be paying attention for that window to open up. So that's just what I'll leave you with here at the end of the show. And that's going to wrap it up for today's show. Don't forget, you can always check it out on Twitter. I post the links each and every day. You can subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher. And also, obviously, live stream with us here on Google Hangouts. How do you live stream? You follow us on Google+. It's at Rotowire, or you subscribe on the YouTube channel there at Rotowire. I'm sorry, if you just search Rotowire for YouTube. I was going to say rotowire.com. And the podcast is always available, by the way, at rotowire.com. So don't forget to check out Benny on Twitter at BennyR11. Send all your comments, complaints, and questions to me at JoshHayesFS. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.